Welcome back, everyone. This is Radio Free Market, and I am your host, Michael McKay, and we're talking with Dr. Paul Cleveland today on understanding the basic principles of how free people and free markets grow or are lost. We were just talking about barter and how primitive that is, and you were making a point on that, Paul. Please go ahead.
Sure. The point I was making is if I had to rely on bartering with everyone for the things that I wanted in life, it would be a hard sell. I was imagining going to the grocery store and trying to offer econ lectures to the store manager in exchange for groceries. Or you can imagine how many courses in economics I might have to do to get an automobile exchange. And then they would really have to want to know, and they might not. But I didn't have to do it that way, because what money allows us to do is that it allows us to enter into more complex contracts. I just entered into a contract with Birmingham-Southern College. They wanted economics courses taught. I'm qualified to teach it. We agreed on an amount of money to be exchanged for the service rendered, and I've noticed that the grocer and the car dealer are gladly willing to take my money in exchange for those things that I want. So money is just this medium by which we exchange with one another, and we indirectly trade goods for goods rather than directly trade them.
So money actually expands our ability to trade in the first place, since the double coincidence of wants severely limits wider trading to take place.
Exactly.
So what about natural barriers to trade that we must overcome? I noticed that you have several that you discuss in your book.
Right. Well, we all face the barrier of distance that we've got to overcome, and so I've got to either transport the good from whoever makes it to myself, or transport myself to get the good, or to procure the service, whichever the case may be. And so transportation costs are an inherent part of the cost of trade, and as well as information. I've got to be aware that somebody is out there and has something that I want, and that they might want what I have, and that we can engage in a trade, that we can exchange. And so there's costs associated with gathering up information, and then finally we've got to be able to communicate with one another. So all of these are costs we face, and then what's been happening over time is these costs have been coming down. In fact, really rather dramatically, they've been dropping.
Well, I mentioned to Zoe recently, I think I may have even mentioned it on air recently, that I went to a grocery store up in Iowa City a few weeks back, and I bought some fresh perch fillets from Lake Victoria in Central Africa. And they had been deeply frozen and flown to the center of Iowa, in a couple of days at a profit to all of the people who handled it, and ultimately on our, served in our kitchen. It's an astounding situation. So as you were saying, these natural barriers to trade of information, transportation, and communication are shrinking rather dramatically.
And so the ability to trade really worldwide has just been exploding in recent years. One of the, here's an example I use in class. I guess it was October of 2008, went to Chengdu, China, to lecture in a number of universities there. And so, I asked the students, I said, well, now imagine the year was 1900 instead of 2008. How long would it have taken me to get from Birmingham, Alabama to Chengdu, China? And, you go by train, cross country, to San Francisco, and of course trains, at that date and time, I think the average speed was around 35 miles an hour, so you can imagine how long it would take to get to California. And then get on a boat, and we've got to cross a steamboat and cross the Pacific, maybe do port in a city like Shanghai, and then I've got to go inland We, of course, to 2008, didn't do it that way at all. Got on a plane, flew to Atlanta, walked across the terminal, got into another waiting area. After a while, boarded another plane, flew to Seoul, South Korea, waited there for a while, boarded another plane, and flew into Chengdu. I think the elapsed time was around 24, 25 hours.
An amazing reduction in time from months.
Oh, absolutely.
To, one day. Talk about a miracle. Yeah.
Yeah. The costs have just gone way down.
You use in the book this example of what a breakthrough it was when Vasco da Gama discovered the water route to Asia from Europe.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. Henry the Navigator had actually founded that school in Portugal with this thought in mind. If we can find an all-water route, if we can find a way through Africa, we'll be able to move the trade from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic where they were. And he was able to get maritime students into school, and their task of learning to sail would be sailing down the coast of Africa looking for a way through Africa. And so da Gama was actually one of these students, and who actually made it all the way, came back, and was reported that the spice load that he brought back paid for the trip 60-fold over, so $60 for every $1 invested in cost.
Wow, amazing.
On the trip. So really just an amazing difference there. I've been looking for that kind of investment myself for some time now, without much luck.
So in addition to these natural barriers, or maybe actually within them, of transportation, communications, and information, merchants have always had to deal with numerous other problems, in addition to distances like weather, harsh seas and terrain, and, of course, those who would rather make a living by merely taking from others what they wanted.
That's right. So paying for security has always been with us as well. I mean, of course, we'd all be much better off if we didn't pursue that sort of approach to try to make our way in this world. But that's not likely to change. If human history teaches us anything, you've got to be on your toes and ever aware of your surroundings in that sort of situation, because there are always going to be people out there who want to make their living by theft.
Well, there's the soft theft of trying to get other people to agree to take from you, and as a condition of you living together,
right,
which is the redistributive statist, collectivist state, if you will. And then, of course, there's the more direct approach. And we've always needed to be able to defend ourselves, and probably always will need to do so. You make the point that by establishing government as having the monopoly power of coercive force, abuse by governments on their people has, of course, as we all know, occurred. But governments were supposed to prevent this.
Sure, that's their purpose. And really the founders, that was what they were aiming for, trying to come up with a means, recognizing the problem that we all face, the issue of security in life, but also they recognize the danger. The danger is always there that governments, because they're institutions of force, that force can be abused. And rather than protecting the citizenry, it can actually violate the citizenry. And so the whole structure of checks and balances was aimed at the limitation of government to keep it in its proper bounds.
Has there ever been a successful experiment yet where political power has been limited to its appropriate realm?
Well, I would say from my study of history, in the course of human history, the American experiment has come closest, never ideal, never perfect, but certainly in the context of human history, the ideals were clearly articulated, even if they weren't practiced to perfection. And in fact, it's hard to imagine that it could be practiced to perfection. So I would say there's really no golden age time, if you will. But there is better and worse, and I think you see that. The way when they're talking about setting up the government, in the preamble is in order to form a more perfect union. Well, that's kind of odd language. After all, what's more perfect than perfect? You can't get more perfect than perfect. And but I think what they were getting at was just this: they didn't think they were going to get perfection, but they thought they could move in that direction.